Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Susan, for that lovely introduction, and thank you for the applause, but don't think for a minute that I take it seriously. I don't. I'm much too smart for that. I learned a long time ago from my mother, who I'll quote more than once this evening, that what applause really means and what it doesn't mean. I was very unhappy with my mother in my third term as governor because she had never once acknowledged that there was anything special about being a governor, even for 3 terms. And that was because I had an older brother, Frank, who had never been a governor or a president. And there wasn't any way you were going to tell the baby of the family something that you couldn't tell to the older brother. And so I never got any acknowledgement or recognition. And I was very frustrated by this. And so once in my third term, I told Matilda to bring my mother over to an affair in Albany where I was going to speak that night because I knew I was going to get a big reception. Why? Because they were lobbyists and I was giving them what they wanted, frankly, or I wouldn't have been going to they deserved it. And so I went to this thing. We put Mama in the front row. This actually happened. And she's sitting with Matilda, and I went and gave the speech, and I was absolutely shameless. I got to the penultimate paragraph, and I said, well, I have a special guest here this evening, my mother. And they all said, I said, no, don't applaud yet. Wait till I'm finished. And then I finished, and they applauded, and they stood up, and they cheered. And I went to my mother, and I said to her in Italian, what do you think of your baby now? And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you heard La Scappata dei Mani, you heard all the applause. And she said in Italian, oh, you think that means they like you? I said, of course. She says in Italian, maybe they were glad you were finished. No, you see, you never get over something like that. You really don't. I told a group outside, and these are true things that, unfortunately, I think it was 1996, and I was supposed to start the season at the Y, which was a big deal. But you wonder, you're out of office now a couple of years, and you've not been on television. Gee, I wonder if there'll be any crowd. And that day it rained like crazy. I mean, it was terrible, and I said, oh boy, that's it. There's nobody going to come to the Y tonight. And I took a cab. I got out in front of the Y and was coming in with a crowd of people, and I was delighted to see all these people coming, folding their umbrellas, and one little old guy and his wife or girlfriend or whatever was coming in, and I went in next to him. I said, boy, it looks like a pretty good crowd. And he said, yeah, it's good, sure. He says, I came. I said, but the rain and everything. He said, oh, I don't care about the rain. He says, I'm here. He says, but I wonder who's speaking. I didn't tell him. I almost didn't want to come out on the stage, So I'm really pleased to be back at the Y. You are literally the best audience in America, and I mean that. I've been all over the country. I talk to all kinds of people, but there's no audience exactly like this one. And the many people who have had over the years the opportunity to be here, I think almost all agree. This is an extremely bright group, an interested group, and a nice and generous group, as you've proven already this evening. And I enjoy coming too because you're so bright and well informed that I never leave here without knowing a little bit more than I knew when I came. And so I'm looking forward to the dialogue period when you'll get a chance to speak. Before then, I'm not going to give you a speech in the sense of some convention oration or attempt to, or even a state of the state kind of speech. I want to talk to you as plainly and clearly as I can about where I think we are as a nation and where I think we ought to be. And I'll start, if I may, where I'm going to conclude. This is how I feel about the nation in a nutshell. Nobody, or very few people, appreciate more than I do what a fantastic miracle of a place the United States is. It is certainly the greatest nation in world history. But it is not nearly as great as it could be if we willed it to be, and if we lived by the one great ideal that I believe is necessary to achieving our full potential as a nation. I was listening to Chopin, the Fantasy Impromptu, and the popularized vulgar version of it is what I'm always chasing rainbows. And I said, geez, how marvelously appropriate, because some people would will think about what I'm saying as chasing rainbows. I don't. I believe it's intensely realistic and almost obligatory to believe what I do about this country, which is, as great as we are, we may miss the opportunity to be as great as we can be unless we accept this one ideal. Okay. America, how great? Well, greater even than the fondest aspiration of the founding fathers. They never could have imagined that we'd have this kind of success. Greatest military power in world history now, the only surviving mega military power. An unfortunate way to mark greatness, but one of the signposts. The biggest, most powerful economy in the world today, no question about that. And maybe even more important, the greatest engine of opportunity that the world has ever seen. 10 generations of people like Andrea and Immacolata Cuomo, who came from Salerno, have come here from all over the world. Many of them humble, like my parents, with very little to offer other than an eagerness to work and a talent for endurance. And these 10 generations came here, and many of them, millions and millions of them, like my family, lived an experience they couldn't possibly have had in their own country had they not come here. And still, millions want to come. More than once, we have saved much of the world from oppression, and even now, we stand as the free world's guardian. For the last several years, we've had what is universally described as a good economy. Some people say a great economy. And the stock market has performed spectacularly well, even better than the economy. And people say that over the next year, the stock market's going to be strong. Why? Because there's a lot of money out there and a lot of irrepressibly optimistic investors. They don't often say because there's a lot of quality stock to invest in. No, they say there's a lot of money and people are going to invest it. So the stock market probably will go up, even if the economy doesn't. This stock market boom has created the richest America in history, and that means the richest place in world history. More millionaires, more billionaires, and more people over $100,000 than ever before in our history. And that's a reason to be grateful. This tremendous wealth is a sign of progress and success. There's no doubt about that. Certainly it is not a success to be offended by. Again, Mama, true story. She's there with me watching television in a room where Dewey and Roosevelt and all these people would sit, and we were alone. On the coffee table in front of us, there is Fortune magazine. On the cover of Fortune magazine is a face. My mother picks it up and looks at it. She couldn't read the English. She says, "Yeah, who is that?" And I looked at it. I said, "It's Lee Iacocca." She must have seen something Italian about his features, But anyway, she says, "Ma che fa? What is he doing?" I said, "Well, let me see." And I looked at it. I said, "Ma, this man makes $20 million a year, and he's complaining that he doesn't make enough." She says, "Vende?" I said, "Yes, $20 million a year." She says, "Ma che fa? What does he do?" And I said, "Well, fa automobili. He makes cars. He's the head of the Chrysler Corporation." She looked at me, the governor, and she said, "What's the matter? You don't know how to make a car?" Now, you see what Mama was saying. What Mama was saying in her broken English, but what she was saying in her simplicity and humility is, wow, 20 million bucks, why not? God bless this kid. Probably came over the way we did, his parents, which they did from Tuscany, I think, Tuscany. Came here, didn't have anything. Now the guy's making 20 million. Let him make $50 million, as long as he didn't cheat, as long as he's not stealing, as long as he didn't do anything wrong. Why not? And you're a governor, big deal. You're still, when you're out of here, we're going to be back to where we were. She was really never comfortable in the mansion because without a deed, she couldn't be comfortable. So there is nothing about the tremendous success we're having at the top that we ought to resent or resist, not at all. But it's also required, I think, that we be honest and objective about where we are. There are more people in the shining city in the hill than ever before in this country. But there's a second city where the glitter doesn't show. That was true in 1984. It is at least as true now. And it's a city that's not described by the pollsters. It's a city that you can see described, if you like, in the World Almanac. All the numbers are there. And the truth is, in this second city, you will find most Americans. You won't find them in the shining city on a hill. You'll find them in the second city. Only 4%, about 270 million people, make $100,000 or more. Now it may have creeped up to 4.5%. The average American who's working earns $22,000. The average family earns under $37,000. That average family has more than one earner in many cases. More than 40 million of our people are poor. 1 out of every 4 children growing up in poverty. That's more than in 1987. Oh no, Mario, real. Yes, more than in 1987. How can it be? Many of these children live not just in technical poverty, which is under 15, 16,000 for a family of 4, 12,000 for a parent and a child, but in abject poverty. I've described it over and over. There are still places like this in this city. There, probably my old neighborhood is one of them, South Jamaica, where you can empty a toddler out into the street at 2.5 years of age, and she or he can walk around surrounded by pimps, prostitutes, debasement, degeneracy of every kind, where children can grow up familiar with the sound of gunfire before they've ever heard an orchestra play. In our city, in this great city, and in others in the United States of America. And she might grow up, if it's a she, to go to a school like PS 50 where I went, that's now deteriorated unfortunately, doesn't have a library, certainly doesn't have computers in any realistic way. She may decide that there's not much point going to this school because the thing is falling apart, and it indicates that they don't care much about her anyway, the people of this city, because they're not giving her a real decent shot at an education. And if she gets through the school, what's she going to do in this society? All the young people are in jail. I built 64,000 prison cells. That's more than all the governors before me put together. 64,000 at $120,000 a pop. Think about it. Why? Because you have these stupid drug laws that say even if the person wasn't violent, they happen to be drug addicted, and they had a crime that was drug implicated, they must serve time. Why? So they can be brutalized and sodomized. They go in addicts, they come out addicts. What did you achieve? But that's the system. And she looks around, there are no young men, and there is no job here for me, let's be honest. And you didn't create a job when you passed a welfare bill that said, go work. So the heck with the education, the heck with everything, I'll make a baby. Why? Because it's something I can love. It'll be mine. No, it's wrong for her to make a baby at 14 or 15. Of course it's wrong. But to think that she did it for a welfare check, or to think she did it to beat you out of something, no, it wasn't it. It was her affirmation. It was her attempt to achieve dignity. Now, that's happening. That kind of thing is happening all through this society, and we know it. We turn our back on it, or we try to, and we cheered the welfare reform bill as a nation because it allowed us to say, well, we finally solved that problem, the poor. We're going to make them work. That'll fix it all up. Oh, really? You're going to make her work without an education? Some of them can't drive a car. They're just learning to be adults. You don't change that by ordering them to be adults and to find a job. And even if they got a job, how good is it? And what will happen with your first recession with a lot of those people? Anyway, that's a condition that still exists. High-skilled workers are doing well. You really have 4 tracks in the United States of America now. You have the top, people over 100,000 or 115,000, and we're familiar with them. The millionaires, the billionaires, and the people are doing well. All of my clients, myself, some of the people in this room. Then we have the second track, the top of the middle class, the high-skilled workers, doing pretty well, high-skilled workers. Then under them, the workers who were not high-skilled. 80% of the working population, did you hear me? 8 out of 10 are low and moderate skilled. How are they doing? Terribly. Over 120 million workers. only lower moderate skilled, and they are not sharing in the nation's abundance. And if they're really earning any more than they did 10 years ago, it's only because they're working longer hours or have added an earner to the family. These numbers are in the almanac. These are not Democratic numbers, liberal numbers, Mario's numbers. These are almanac numbers. For them, the household incomes are actually less than they were in 1989. While the cost of health care, do I have to tell you how much that's still going up, even with managed care? Your wage rate might be going up 2.5%, 3% if you're very lucky. But then there's inflation, and then health care, transportation, housing, higher education. All those costs are going up faster than the wages of these people, and so they're sliding down. And then you have the fourth tier under them, the poor people, who, of course, are going nowhere. And in the same country where, the stock market is fantastic, quadrupled, I guess, over the last 5-6 years, quadrupled the Dow averages. In this same country, 43 million Americans who are not poor enough for Medicaid, not old enough for Medicare, not lucky enough to have a plan with an employer, and not able to buy their own health insurance. 43 million workers. We're fighting about HMOs. And, how are we going to, the president wants to have a Bill of Rights to strengthen the insurance that you have in managed care. Fine, we're all for that. That's right. But what about the people who have no insurance? Have you heard them mentioned anywhere recently? Why not? Well, there's no constituency. If you could gather 43 million people, those 43 million people on a Sunday afternoon somewhere, and get them on television and have them all shout at once at the politicians and at the rest of us, and have them tell their stories about the children and about the woman with the breast cancer, 39 years old, a secretary making $25,000, trying to raise 2 children, a 17-year-old about to go to college. She's praying that she'll be able to get her into a good college and maybe help pay the bill, even with her thin salary, working like mad to keep that little family together. Breast cancer, no insurance, devastation. You'll get health care. Everybody gets health care, even if you don't have insurance. But it won't be the health care my daughters get. It won't be the health care that Matilda got or that I would get. And it probably will require bankruptcy wherever she goes. And then she has to start all over if she survives the breast cancer. You hear stories about children who can't get a bone marrow transplant that they need to stay alive, literally. You tell enough of those stories and things would change, but the politicians haven't heard them, so nothing's happening with these 43 million people. We're becoming more and more a country of the rich and the poor, with a huge middle class sliding backwards. That's the truth, the absolute truth, even though you don't hear it from the Democrats or from the Republicans. Let's be honest. My own party isn't making it as clear as it should be. Why? Because if you make it clear, you have to do something about it. And that may be inconvenient politically. The top 5%, powerful and still growing. Terrific. Mama, if she was still with us, would be cheering. The bottom 60% going down. Chairmen of corporations used to make 40 times what the workers make. Guess what they make now? 200 times what the workers make. There's nothing like this anywhere in the industrial world. The difference is greater than it's ever been, and greater than anywhere in Great Britain, Italy, Germany, most of the Euro nations. Who says so? The almanac says so. The numbers say so. The truth says so. Kevin Phillips, who wrote the book, The Politics of Rich and Poor, a Republican who worked for Nixon, a very good analyst, said so. 1990, 2 squibs on that book, on the back of the book. One was by Richard Nixon, may he rest in peace, and the other was by Mario Cuomo. And what I said is, this should have been written by a Democrat. Where are we? That was 1990. I asked Kevin recently, actually within the year, why don't you do another version, Kevin? Because it's worse. He said, you're right, Mario, it's worse than another. I said, do another book. He said, they won't believe us. In the meantime, Social Security, Medicare, HMOs, campaign financing all badly need reform, and all the other avoidable disasters, the violence, the drug addiction, the broken families, tragically prevalent, destroying lives, costing us billions of dollars, and all of this happening. We're dismissing it now because we read, oh, it's getting better. Oh, terrific, violence is getting better, so we don't have to worry about violence. Yes, you do. Bill Bennett and I are co-chairs of the Partnership for a Drug-Free America with James Burke, a great American, who's chairman of that wonderful group. And I can tell you, we work on this all the time. 9-year-old children, addicts, alcoholics, younger than ever. We still have big problems. On top of that, you have Japan, Thailand, Malaysia, Russia, Korea, Brazil, all in trouble. And because they're in trouble, Russia's a particular problem. They're in trouble. You have to worry because they have the missiles, and if they get into enough trouble to invite chaos, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble. We're not so much concerned about their economy in terms of exports and imports because they're only the size of, Denmark. As to the others, Japan, we need. Brazil is 20% of our exports. We have to worry about these countries because we need them to buy from us. Right now, they're not buying from us, but we're buying from them. That's how come a lot of our money and wealth is leaving the country. That's what the deficit is all about that you read about this morning. So these are problems. Can we change? Can we do something about this? Or is this as good as it gets? Is this a Jack Nicholson movie? I mean, is America prepared to say, no, this is it, baby. This is good. Maybe my people are prepared to say that. This is good as it gets. Don't mess with it. Why? Because you can't. If you try to improve it, you're going to hurt it for me. You can't help the weakest without hurting the strongest. That is the implicit statement being made by a lot of people. Do you believe that? I don't. I think there's a lot we can do. Let me race through what I think we can do, and then we'll hear what you say. First of all, we have to get rid of L'Affaire Lewinsky. This endless saga. It's not easy. It really isn't. I'm not going to talk about it. Why? I can't handle this. In the question and answer period, I will. But right now, I can't handle it. Why? I was an altar boy at St. Monica's Church. Ad Deum qui laetificat juventud meum. Confidia Deo omnipotente Beata Maria Semper Virgin. All the prayer. I know all the Latin. Incidentally, I was also a Shabbos Goy. I did not know the Hebrew. I didn't know the Latin. Didn't make any difference. It was the same thing. Saturday, Sunday, had vestments, brocaded vestments, incense, aura, mystery. Nobody understood really. So you mumbled languages you didn't know just to remind, you didn't know what you were saying. You said, what's the difference? Who can figure him out anyway? But I did learn things as I grew up about Monica, St. Monica. Santa Monica was the Bishop of Hippo's mother. The Bishop of Hippo was St. Augustine. St. Augustine was the promiscuous youth who converted late, not quite the way Saul converted. Saul was converted when lightning hit him in the tush. With Augustine, it was different. Augustine, came to it intelligently, but in his youth, Augustine was a wild man. He had all kinds of things going on, orgies, etc. And they said to him once, how do you feel about chastity? And he's responsible for the great quote. I look it up in Bartlett's. I approve of chastity, but not quite yet. So with all of that swirling around in my mind, I can't deal with Monica. But we'll talk about it later. But once we get rid of this, and it'll happen, I think, this week or the week after. Within the next 2 weeks, we'll be out of this thing, is my guess. And then the President and Congress have to go back to doing what we need to do. Now, what do we need to do? First of all, continue to do the things you've been doing right. You got rid of the deficit. That's a good thing. It frees up all sorts of money for investment. Don't go back to the deficits. Please don't go back to the deficits. You've got a surplus now. Let's hold on to that surplus. So let's not overspend. Let's not overcommit ourselves. I believe that very deeply. Let's not go crazy and start taxing business all of a sudden because they're doing so well, etc. Let's not tax business in a way that's going to spoil what's good about the current economy. I agree with that too. I'm not for strong, big taxes that are going to punish and hurt. High technology has been a great strength for many years and one of the principal reasons for our current success. We've always been strong on technology. When I was governor, I remember we set up 13 centers of advanced technology in advanced processing, telecommunications, ceramics, all sorts of things. We have to keep doing that. The space program is a good idea because it throws off an awful lot in terms of high research, of technological research and high technology. With respect to trade, we have to avoid any temptation toward isolationism like Pat Buchanan's. Yeah, there's things we have to do about trade because our workers are getting hurt unnecessarily in some cases, and so we have to balance our trade, but basically we have to keep it free. You have to keep the commerce going between us and Japan and Brazil, and therefore we have to find ways to help Japan and Brazil and Russia. Absolutely essential. We have to keep that commitment to that. But also we have to be sure we do everything we can here at home to expand our own economy domestically in a way that benefits those who have been sliding down in the middle class and those whom we have left behind entirely in the poor. What do we need to do for them? Enhance productivity, increase productivity so that they can get wage increases in the middle class. Enhance productivity. Productivity means you produce so much an hour. Produce more for the hour. That's the only way you can get wage increases, because if you don't increase productivity, Alan Greenspan will kill you if you give wage increases. Because he will say wage increases without increased productivity are going to be inflationary. They'll drive prices up, because if I give you a wage increase and you don't produce any more pencils in that hour than I can sell, it's going to come out of my hide unless I raise the price. So you raise the price. But if you double the number of pencils, I'll sell the extra pencils, and with the money I make for the extra pencils, I'll keep some additional profits. I'll give you some as wage increases. So you have to increase productivity. What does that mean? Skill level. Instead of only 20% of our workers being high skilled, let's have 50% high skilled, a big number to achieve. How do you do that? Education and training. What happens when they're high skilled? Right now you're going to import 115,000 computer engineers for places like Silicon Valley at a price of $90,000 to $110,000 a year to start. The average wage is $22,000. You have jobs, over 100,000 you're going to give away this year to people you're going to reach out to Pakistan and India and all over the world to bring here because you can't train your people to do that work. How does that make any sense? How do you justify it? How do you vote for that without standing up and saying, hey, wait a minute. I'll give you the 115,000 workers if you really need them because our economy needs them. But somebody explain to me why we can't get them out of Queens. Can't we teach our people to be computer engineers, for God's sakes? We lead the world in technology. Education, education, education. Training. Now, how do you do that? I'm not going to, we'll be discreet about it if you like when we get to the question and answer period, but there are two categories of things you can do. A lot of adjectival, procedural things like insist on standards, I'm all for it. Make sure the bureaucracy isn't wasteful, I'm all for it. Make sure the teachers work hard, yes, absolutely. Make sure you have a strong principal, ooh, great. Choice within the public school system, all these things cost no money, that's why you hear about them all the time. That's why, the president will say, increase the standards, do this, all those things that, other than let's pay money. Let's do all those things that don't cost anything, but you're going to have to invest. Why? You need $150 billion just to repair the public school building in this country. You know what the situation is with school buildings here. You need money to go from 180 days to more. They're going to school 240 days, 230 days, 220 days. Why do you think Stuyvesant High School is 52% Asian? Best high school of its kind in the world. Over 50% Asian the last time I looked. God bless them. I love every one of them, and I'm glad we have them here. But how do they beat our students into that wonderful school? They're better at math and science. Why? They have equation genes? No. That's that dumb guy who wrote the book about, some people genetically not as smart as the other, Asians, they got equation genes. I think about this stupidity, and I think I've said this before. What would the Caucasian gene be? I think I know. Golf. So it's not the genes, it's that they go to school more. They have better training, 240 days, 225 days of schooling. So you need longer school years, smaller classes, more computers, better teachers, better buildings. And you need it in the public schools because right now you have 47 to 50 million public school children in public schools. You have only about 5 or 6 million in private schools. No matter what you did with vouchers or tricks or gimmicks, the vouchers, that's a dilettante's argument to be used on people who are ignorant. The notion that you could make any big difference with 40 to 50 million public school children by giving vouchers, how many seats do you have in the private schools? Do you have 10 million seats waiting empty with 5 million students? Or are you going to pay them to build new schools? So play all the games you want with vouchers. You know, the country votes against them. But vouchers, incidentally, is a question for the city of New York, for the local school district, not for the federal government. Why are you bringing it up in Washington? And if vouchers were such a good idea, why don't they vote for them all over the country? Why do you have like only 5 places in the country that even tries them? So forget that. You have to invest some money. And you have to be clear about saying so. Politicians don't want to say that. Even for education, which is on the top of everybody's list in terms of what ought to be done in this country. The health care, the 43 million people without health care, sick children and sick workers don't improve productivity, or are they easier to educate when they're sick? What do you do about those 43 million people who can't afford? Well, we started something that the federal government applied federally a few years ago, thanks to prompting by President Clinton, Child Health Plus. What we did was took middle-class families that didn't qualify for Medicaid but had children, and we went to the insurance companies and they designed insurance programs, health insurance programs, not acute, but gave them primary care, got them into a cycle of care, which is helpful. It'll avoid some acute, it gives you preventive medicine a little bit, and it gets you in the habit, and it's a start. And we gave money, frankly. Yes, we took it out of the Treasury. Yes, we redistributed wealth. Yes, absolutely. The way you do for defense and for electric chairs. We took money out and we redistributed it. And now the federal government is doing the same thing, thanks to Orrin Hatch, a very good man, if you judge him by what he did on that bill. Well, come on, Mario, you haven't changed at all, boy. Good to see you back, big spender. We don't have the money for all. I'm not a big spender, incidentally. I balance 12 budgets. Ask Matilda how big a spender I am. We can't afford it. Of course you can afford it. Of course you can afford it. You could have afforded it last year and the year before and the year before that. That is not even an issue. Certainly you can afford it. You don't want to spend the money that way. You want to spend it other ways. Let's be honest. That's legitimate. But don't tell me you couldn't afford it. You want proof? Ask yourself, how did we do the space program? President Kennedy stood up one day in the 60s and said, we're going to be the first people to the moon. We want to be the first in space, period. He never said how. He never said we were going to get the money. $319 billion we've spent. Every year we spend $19 to $20 billion in the budget. Did you know that? No, I didn't know that. Nobody told me. That's okay. Where did they get it? Who knows? They had deficits, they had wars, they had Vietnam, they had Iraq. Nothing out with $319 billion. Why? Because we decided to spend it. The savings and loan, another favorite. Everybody talked about it at the time. Over $300 billion. Where did you get it? Well, you have a budget of $1 trillion. What's $300 billion? You cheat. You move this over here, you slide that over, you lie, you do whatever. You have $300 billion. How'd you get the money for the Iraqi conflict that came up overnight? Where'd you get it? Where'd you get the money for Vietnam? Where'd you get it? Where did it come from? Where do you get the money to do $110 billion for tax cuts a couple of years ago while we still had a large deficit? How did you do that? A large portion of that went to the top 1%. In America, actually 68% of those tax cuts went to the top 1% of earners. That's people who earn like $250,000 a year, $275,000 a year. 68% of that tax cut went to them, while you didn't have money for education, or for health care, or for environment, or for housing. What, because you were broke? Where did you get $150 billion in what the Republicans are calling corporate welfare? Now, corporate welfare means you take the money and you give it to a corporation to help it. Is it always bad? No. I did a lot of that. I did it to get companies to come to poor neighborhoods. That's what the enterprise zone idea is. I'll give you a tax break. You come to South Jamaica, you open a plant, you put them to work. I'll give you a tax break. Some tax breaks to big businesses I'll approve of. John Kasich, a very conservative guy, says, hey, no. There's $50 billion there we can take, just like that. $50 billion. You can do a lot. You know how many desks you can buy with $50 billion? And now all of this discussion is academic. Absolutely academic. Why? Because of the State of the Union. We don't even have to do this exquisite numbers game. I don't have to pour through the budget to see where they wasted money, and I can give you a lot more numbers than the ones I've given you. Because now we have announced, Democrats and Republicans alike, agreeing with the president, $4 trillion in the next 15 years of surplus. Whoa! How many? Trillion. How many zeros in a trillion? I don't know. It goes all the way out to the men's room. You just put all the... I don't know how many zeros there are. 12, 4. What's the difference? I know it's more than $1 billion. A lot more. More than we ever had before. How dare you even suggest now that we can't help that woman who needed health insurance for her breast cancer, or that child who needed a bone marrow operation, or that school that needed a roof? How dare you say that we don't have enough money to do that? And yet, some people are saying it. We have enough money to reform Social Security, to reform Medicare, to give adequate health care, to do all the things we know have to be done. And I'm not talking about giving money away, and I'm not talking about taking care of people who don't deserve it, people who won't work. Forget about that. I saw my mother and father nearly work themselves to death. I said in 1984, and I've heard the line 100 times, I saw my father bleed from the bottom of his feet in that damn grocery store. And I knew why he was doing it. He was doing it for us. And I saw how he worked. And I haven't worked nearly as hard, but I've worked as hard as I thought I could. Why? Because I believe you're supposed to. And I'm not good at giving things to people who want me to work hard, deprive my children of maybe even luxuries, so that they don't have to work. Of course, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about helping people who have tried as hard as they could, but for reasons beyond them, like that little girl in the ghetto, for reasons that she's not responsible for. Helping her with a little daycare, not getting her off the hook, making her work, but giving her the chance to do it properly. A little daycare, a little encouragement, a little counseling, a lot of education, a little help in finding a job. And make her work. I'm not talking about relieving people of responsibility. I'm talking about empowering them to have still greater responsibility, with greater fruit, with greater dividends, that we can all share as a society once they function productively. You know what it comes down to in the end? What kind of nation do you choose to be? And what do you want to do with this $4 trillion? Do you want to be the kind of nation we had for 150 years, from 1789 until 1932? There was nothing in the Constitution that said you had to help one another. There was nothing in the Constitution that said if a man lost his hand in a machine and couldn't work to support his 8 children, that the society, through the federal government, the collectivity, as Lincoln referred to it, should help them. There was nothing to say that if you got too old to work and you had no family to support you, there ought to be some kind of program to give you enough bread to survive and maybe a roof over your head. There was nothing to say it, and we didn't do it. For 150 years, it was dog eat dog, and you had slavery, and you had women being abused, and children being abused, and workers working every day of their life and dying poor. And then the Depression. And then you invented a new kind of government, that said, hey, that government for 150 years didn't work. We need a new thing here. Mutuality, call it what you will, but the people who have strength left have to get together with the people who are weak and help the people who are weak, because it's going to be good for the people who still have strength. And that was the WPA. And that was relief. And that was unemployment insurance, and that was Social Security, and then 30 years later, that was Medicare and Medicaid and civil rights, and that was the public school system, which grew in these years. Evidences of mutuality and a greater intelligence that says we're all in this together. It's for us to decide what we will be. And now the issue has been joined. President Clinton stood up and said, we're going to have $4 trillion. I want to take the money and do some for education, some for health care. I didn't agree with all the ways he was spending and the amounts he was using, but what he was saying is, my principle, let's invest in human beings to give them a better chance to be productive. And the other side is saying what? Let's have a tax cut across the board. You know what across the board means? It's like 1997. The people at the top get 68%. And what do the other people get? What my mother would call niente. Well, then how is this going to help us? Well, if you give it to me and my clients are in business. And if you give us the money, boy, we're going to have incentive to invest more. Really? Sure, you give us a capital gains tax cut, we'll go right into the market, we'll invest more, we'll build another factory, we'll make so much money, we'll put you to work. Sooner or later, you'll do well. That's what they told us for 150 years. That's what President Reagan told us, God bless him. Supply side, everybody will do well, give us a big tax cut. Doesn't work that way. It never did. Never has. And it won't. Interesting theory, though. Pass the welfare reform bill, make them work or they starve. Pass the capital gains tax cut, give them an incentive. You have carrots for the rich people, sticks for the poor people. Fascinating philosophy. And that's where we are. You'll have to choose. We've done it before. We've given that money to the rich people. I'm not against the rich people. Mama was not against the rich people. 78% of the people of the United States of America are saying we're becoming, however, a nation of rich and poor. But still, it's not going to be easy to change it. Why? Guess how many people vote in this country? 78% of the people know it's becoming a nation of rich and poor, and implicitly are afraid of that, because they're not in the top 5%. 26% of the eligible voters vote. So you see numbers like 40%, 41%. That's of registered voters. Eligible voters are people who don't even register. But they're eligible. They don't even bother to register. Who do you think the 26% are? They include every one of the 5%. They include everybody who's doing well. That's where the power is in that small group of people who can raise up the tobacco money, even the AFL-CIO. It's a small band of people who have most of the wealth, which is the way our political system works nowadays. And the mass of the population has been lulled into an acceptance of lowered expectations. That's what happened. They don't think it can change. Why? Because it's been this way for about 20 years to begin with. And because there is no powerful leader anywhere telling them it can change. Look, I've given you only numbers from the World Almanac. I haven't exaggerated any of them. When's the last time you heard this from a leading politician? I am not a leading politician. I'm not even a politician. I'm grateful for this audience. I don't get an audience on national television anymore, because I'm not in public life. How many people have you seen on television deliver this speech who are in power? And if no politician is saying it, why should anybody believe it out there? Why should people who are working themselves to death believe that there's any point in picketing and protesting and demanding? You ask them in a poll, how's the country doing? They say, great. Why? Because they don't really think it can be any better. And they don't even bother voting anymore for that reason. It's a shame. Let me finish. It really is a shame. You know what would be nice? If we had some force, some hero, who could stand up and tell the people what the truth is. Moses. I love Moses. I really did. I never loved him so much as when Mel Brooks did Moses. Did you see that? You know the thing I'll never forget about Mel Brooks and Moses? Mel Brooks came out with 3 tablets. Do you remember? They each had like 5 commandments on them. He looked at one, he says, forget about it, threw it away. And he settled for 10. But when Moses told you, this is it, baby, no more fooling around, that was it. Nobody questioned it. He was Moses. He was the leader, and people followed him. I'll settle for Washington. Washington was a great leader, maybe even Roosevelt. But we don't have any heroes. Bill Clinton might have been a hero. That opportunity is gone. And I believe, frankly, that the age of heroes is behind us, probably irretrievably. That seems so clear. We've written songs about it. Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Nation turns its lonely eyes to you. They took John Kennedy, then Martin Luther King Jr., then Bobby Kennedy, and they left us only the song. The ground is too hard now. It's too unforgiving to try to grow heroes. And if you tried constructing a hero, then the intense heat generated by electronic communication would melt the feet of clay right away. You raise Colin Powell, who is a legitimate hero. You raise him now to the presidency, we will have him for lunch. We will take him apart, a strip of flesh at a time. So there are going to be no more heroes, no more heroines, not in the foreseeable future. Last time I can remember, actually, the people of this country all locking arms in some grand common cause, being unified behind some powerful truth, was the Second World War. Second World War, they were evil, we were good. They were the oppressors, we were the saviors. There was no doubt about it. And because of the way it came suddenly upon us, unprepared, and because the truth was so great, we forgot about blacks and Jews and believers and non-believers and women and men, and all of that was foolishness for the most part. We were Americans, and we had to make the good fight, and we did everything we had to do. We didn't know how to make a tank or a plane. We learned overnight. The genius of the American people came out. We put those stars in the window with pride. Blue star. He's off to war. My son, my father, my brother, off to war. And that's all right. We're standing behind him. And then maybe 10 months, 11 months, 12 months later, the bad news came. And you'd see her leave her home and go to St. Monica's Church or to the shul and cry and cry and cry and wail and say, Lord, why did you let it happen? And then she'd come back, and then they'd take down the blue star and they put a gold star in the window. He's gone now. Back to the fight, back to the helmets and the air raid wardens and the drills and the factories. It was an ugly moment with people being murdered. My God, the Holocaust occurred. But there was a beauty to it in this country, too, because you saw everybody together, fantastically strong. We've never been that strong. Not before, not since. But if we have no hero or heroine, do we really have to wait for another calamity like that to come together? Isn't there any other way we can find a device that will make us cohesive, bring us all basically behind the same belief, uplift us? I think there is a way. I think if we have no hero or heroine, no calamity to join us, we might have a heroic message, a heroic idea, a heroic ideal, something clear enough for us to recognize, sensible enough for all of us to believe, powerful enough to unite and uplift us, sweet enough to enjoy, something that's practically sound and morally reassuring all at once. There is such an idea. It's as old as the idea of family. It's as old as the cave dwellers clustering together to ward off their enemies, to find food, to raise children, to grow crops. The idea that drew 13 states into the Articles of Confederation and then drew them closer through a constitution designed to increase the individual strength of each by tying them all together more tightly than the Articles of Confederation did. There is an idea, and it's a great idea. It's an idea that we've seen in the IMF and the World Bank. In Japan and Germany, an even better example after the Second World War. There was a Holocaust. There were millions of other people killed in the war begun by the Nazis. And yet we went back to Europe after the war, and to Germany, and to Italy, who had fought against us. And we spent millions of billions of dollars in the Marshall Plan to bring them back to life. And we sent MacArthur to Japan, and we sent more billions of dollars to bring them back to life after they stabbed us in the back on December 7th. Now, why did we do that? We did that because of this great idea. It's a great idea that says we are all in this together. We're all interconnected and interdependent. We all need one another. And we all should help one another. And the strong can help the weak without the strong being made weaker. And if you do it right, you will all become stronger. You will find your greatest individual good in the good of the whole community. That's Jeremiah. And it's a principle that tells us if we make Japan and Germany stronger, we will have markets to deal with after the Second World War. If we make Russia stronger, we can avoid chaos. We make Brazil stronger, which we apparently are doing, thank goodness, we will be able to continue to sell 20% of our exports to Brazil, and maybe more, putting more people to work here, and with education at higher skill levels, making more money for all of us. If we can give more education, more health care to those people in South Jamaica, then we will have less disorientation, less sickness, less violence, less crime, less expense for prison cells and for police and for the billions we now spend, and more revenues from taxes that they earn. It's good for us. It's an old truth. It started, I think, with the Hebrews. I haven't been able to find the word charity or an equivalent of it in pagan times. Maybe you have. There is the word philanthropy in ancient Egypt, but that was referring to people who agreed to do public works, build an aqueduct, and they gave them certain benefits for that because it was good for the whole community. But it takes monotheism. It takes the Hebrews. First Hebrew looked up to the first Hebrew God and said, "What am I?" And the voice came down and said, "Look to your left, look to your right. She's your sister, he's your brother, even if they're not your blood." Tzedakah. You have an obligation to them as though they were your brother and sister, as a matter of righteousness, not as a matter of choice, not as a matter of compassion, because it is the right and truthful thing to do. And what do I do with these brothers and sisters? Tikkun olam, repair the universe. Can you imagine Tevye? Repair the universe. I can't deal with my daughters. They're chasing me out of the country. I'm schlepping to another land. And I'm sure the Hebrew God sent the message. Yes, tzedakah and tikkun olam. And with whatever capacity you have, and you can decide, Tevye, I'll take your word for it. Take care of yourself. Take care of your wife. Take care of the daughters to the extent that they'll listen to you. Do what you can. And as your strength increases, if you can help people in the village or the town you're going to in the new land, then help them too. And if you get to be mayor, help the whole village. And if you get to be king, help the whole kingdom. Make it sweeter. Make it better. I don't have to tell you how. You'll know that. You'll learn what's good and what's not good, what's sweet and what's sour, what's bitter and what's right. You'll learn that. And the Christians borrowed it whole. The founder of the Christian church gets stopped on the road by a tempter, a lawyer, a wise guy, who says, "I hear you dazzled him in the synagogue, Rabbi. Give me a 15-second commercial that sums up what you believe." And he did it in 15 seconds. "Love one another as you love yourself for the love of me, and I am truth. And the truth is God made the world but didn't finish it. And your mission is to collaborate in creation. And you must do it all together. Islam takes the best of Judaism and Christianity and says exactly the same thing. That's the truth. We're all in this struggle together, and we have to find our own individual good in the good of the whole community. Not because it's morally right, not because it's compassionate, but because it's the only way it can work. We are progressing from the slime of the beginning of our existence to the sublime, eternal ending, whatever that's going to be. And we're progressing in fits and starts, moving upward by integrating, by growing, by merging our strengths, not by fragmenting, not by opposing one another, not by being alienated from one another. That's something real to believe in. That is the truth that lifted us out of the Depression. That is the truth that won the Second World War for us. That is the truth that we know now internationally, and we're going to spend trillions of dollars on. Why can't we do it for South Jamaica and the South Bronx, for that little girl, for the people who live in our neighborhood? Why don't we understand it? Isn't it beautiful? Doesn't it at least give you something to live for? What else do you have? Whom do you want to live for? Yourself? Just you? Is that enough for you? It's not enough for me. I am not enough for me. If all there is me, I'd give it up tomorrow. The only thing that gives you any meaning at all is that you can make a contribution to the whole. That's what it's about. Without that, there is no religion. There is no purpose. That's the way I see it. I wonder what you think. Thank you very much. Thank you. Looks like you were glad I finished. Okay, we'll take questions. I say this every time I'm here. I'm terrific at taking questions. I'm a little weak with answers, but I'm terrific at accepting questions. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Oh, no way. No way. No, I don't think the answer is to limit the compensation that they get. I think the answer is to increase the compensation that the workers get. I don't believe in putting an artificial limit on Michael Jordan or on some great corporate leader. If the shareholders of that corporation are satisfied with the progress, then fine. That's not the problem. You don't make any progress by holding people back. You make progress by moving people up. And so I use the number to show that we're more successful at the top than we are in the middle of the bottom. And you solve that problem by moving the middle and the bottom up, not by dragging the top down. Yes, ma'am. Excuse me. What you've described is maybe one of the advantages. Excuse me. I think if you were to go home now tonight, or maybe we can do it now, and add some flesh to the skeleton of that idea, legalize drugs. Which drugs? For whom? Under what circumstances? Under what conditions? With what restrictions? Who distributes them? Are you talking about heroin? Legalizing it for my 18-year-old son who might come home from his graduation party a little bit drunk on alcohol and say with the guys, why don't we go down and try the heroin that is legal? See what that means. Well, let's try some crack. If that's what you mean, it's madness. That can't be what you mean. And when Bill Buckley and I had a discussion about it, legalize, I said, just give me the details, Bill. What would you legalize? He didn't want to get into the details. This is like vouchers. It's a wonderful idea until you start spelling out the details. Now, we do have legalized drugs. I helped start and run one of the first methadone clinics in Red Hook, Brooklyn, where I represented Long Island College Hospital. This was long before I went into public life. And that's still a program. There are 34,000 people on methadone. Methadone is a drug, and it's legalized. It's limited to heroin users who are addicted. They have to be addicted to get into the program, and then you get them into the program so that they're subjected to counseling and all sorts of treatment to try to break down the addiction, and you keep them going with methadone. The mayor, recently argued that, everything should be cold turkey, and there is that argument, and always has been, but we've had that program for a long, long time. There are drugs that are legally used every day to put people out of their misery, who are in great pain near the end of life. Morphine is used. And some people want to use marijuana for that purpose. You look closely at some of the referenda where they did that. They also were legalizing heroin, which is a big mistake. Using marijuana for healthcare purposes, if the FDA and the doctors study it and say it's needed, why not? You use morphine. So, exquisite, discreet legalization there. But this, an elaborate legalizing of heroin and cocaine and the really troublesome drugs, madness. Madness. Nobody believes that. Now, they appear to be moving in that direction, but you ask them the next time, Judge Robert Sweet, a man for whom I have great respect, the federal judge, or George Shultz, great member of the cabinet, a wonderful man. I've met him. I have a lot of admiration for them. Or Bill Buckley, another guy. I think he's great. I really, I don't agree with anything he says, but No. But there's a difference between agreeing with him and liking him. I think he's a terrific guy and he's a lot of fun. But you ask them, would you do heroin? Oh, no. Would you do crack? No. But what would you do? What they're really saying is, what we're trying to do with methadone. No, I think my answer is legalize all drugs? No. Legalize some? Give me the case. Methadone, I'd say yes to. And I have said yes to, under the circumstances I've described. Yes?
Governor, do you think it's possible for a candidate who does not support capital punishment to be elected today?
Oh, yeah. I was elected 3 times. Do you think a candidate who does not support the death penalty can be elected? Yes, I was elected. Do you think you could do it tomorrow? Well, it hurt me badly in '94, but I think now it'd be easy to be for capital punishment, against capital punishment. Why? Because it's the law. See, now you go and say, I'm against it. And they say, what do we care? It's the law. So now it's an easy score, I'm against that rotten thing. You think you can get it changed? Nah. But I'm against it. All right, good. My mother, I have told the story, but I've got to tell it again because Mama had the answer here. And this says a lot about politics. I'm running against Koch. I know I told some of you this story before. I'm going to tell it again. 1977, I'm running against Koch, and I came back, and Son of Sam is killing little girls. And everybody's up in arms. Brighton Beach, they spat at me. Literally, a group of people, you're against it. Pooh, Jesus, of all the places to Brighton Beach, I loved the beach. Even with those little old guys with no clothes on in the shower room. One of the funniest sights in America. So my mother says, you don't like the electric chair? I said, no. She said, my Koch you like? I said, yeah, Koch is all for the death penalty. She says, a woman that came up to me and says, how come your son is so big, he's so strong, he's so stupid, and is so weak? I said, whoa. She says, yes. Koch, you're going to win. I says, Ma, I can't be for the death penalty. She says, why not? And I said, because it's debased, and I gave her the whole argument. She says, then you're going to lose. I said, then I'll lose. You want your son, your baby, to change his heart and mind just to win this election? She says, because she was very smart. She said, listen, you don't have to lose. You tell him you won the electric chair. After you win, forget about it. That's one way to do it. Incidentally, a lot of people are getting elected that way nowadays. A lot of people are getting elected, not on that issue, but basically, by just being cute with the polls and playing cute with the polls. And really, the ultimate way is just to change your mind, conveniently, George Bush. See? So, but look, I think in the long run, it probably does not hurt you, assuming that the rest of your agenda is acceptable. It doesn't hurt you to have one or two pieces where people disagree with you, but you make an intelligent case, you make a sincere case, you don't make it for any apparent self-aggrandizement, like he's taking that position because he's going to get a lot of money from people. And if they, especially in this great state, and this city in particular, if they believe you, a lot of people will pay something to get a politician they believe, a politician they respect. Even pay the price of saying, well, what the hell? Even if he disagrees with me on that issue, I'm going to take this guy. I like the idea that he stands up for what he believes. There's still a lot of people like that. Maybe more now than there were even when I was running. Yes? Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, you've made are you a school teacher? Oh, uh-huh. Oh, that means you don't teach. I mean, really. I should have said professor. I was an adjunct, but not a real professor. I'm delighted you brought this up because I should have been sharper on this. When I say that 80% of the workers are low and moderate skilled, what that equates to roughly, if you, again, go to the Almanac, and I love the Almanac because it's objective. If you look at their numbers for workers and numbers for education, they equate high skilled with years of education after high school. So what they're really saying is, in order to be high skilled, you have to have 4 more years of education or some education after high school. And that's very, very important. The college education, the university education, more and more essential. 2 things on that. Number 1, the federal government can help there and must help there and should help there. Number 2, the cheapest way to help people get an education is public higher education, like the state university system in CUNY. And I would just say, with CUNY, I was never able to do all I wanted to do for CUNY. With the state university, I was never able to do all I wanted to do for the state university. If I had my way, there would have been no tuition. And that was once true of CCNY and the city university. And before you gasp and say, oh my God, what an outrageous notion, the public schools are free through high school. What's the theory there? Why do you put 50 million children in school, even if they're rich, and say you don't have to pay? Because this society decided a long time ago that a certain level of education is essential for our welfare. And if you can do it in a way that synthesizes and synergizes the people, if you can find an opportunity to bring all different kinds of people into one place when they're young and growing up together, that'll be very good, even spiritually, for people. And that's what the public schools used to be. The old Bronx High School of Science, or Stuyvesant, or Brooklyn Tech, or any of Matilda, still raves about her high school education. Midwood in Brooklyn. I'm a Midwood lady. Yeah, terrific. Midwood. So I think the city university, now I don't want to cheap shot the current people in power, but they have a different commitment to the city university than I think is necessary. I think we should be building the City University. We should be investing more in the City University than we have. The subject of open admission is a tricky business. I mean, you've got to make university available, but you've got to educate people to a certain level so that they can get the benefit of the university education, of the college education, and you have to find ways to do that. What the best way is, I don't know. But you've got to provide that opportunity to get them up to a level where they can benefit from a 4-year education or a 2-year education. I think the community colleges, frankly, the 2-year schools are especially important in this environment. They're more accessible. They meet a very big need. There are some people who don't want 4 years, who don't need 4 years, but who can do very, very well with 2 years of community college education. This is especially true upstate. So, yes, to be a high-skilled worker, you have to get an education beyond high school. And the City University, I think, should be a much, much higher priority for both the state and the city than it is now. Yes? Okay, let me give you an answer that ranges from the shockingly blunt to a little bit of finesse. The shockingly blunt. I'm not sure of this, but the last time I looked at the argument for Social Security reform, the predicate, which was that the Social Security system is going to fail us by 2032 or whatever the date is, was that if you project the growth of the economy and the demographics, which is, how many workers we'd have for how many old people, and the number obviously is going to be a lot more old people per worker than there is today, I think they use a number of 1.7% economic growth. That's what they project for the economy. That is, does anybody know? No. Now I can talk freely. But no. But you look it up. If that's true, then that number, yes? Is that right? No, what is the growth in the economy going to be? Oh, no, it's going to be much less than that. I think they're saying 1.7%, but I'm almost certain. Please look it up. If it's 1.7%, the economy for sure is going to grow faster than that. That's a very low number. Why would they use a very low number? Maybe there are people who want the reform, and maybe the reform they're looking for is privatization, because it will mean trillions of dollars in wealth to a lot of people, okay? So look at that number. If you strike the 1.7 and say 2.1 or 2.2 or 2.3, not to say 2.4% in growth, which is high, but not as great as, not incredible. Say 2.1 or 2.2, you don't have the problem that the president's talking about, because the economic growth will take care of it, okay? Now, if it is 1.7, and it stays that low, and that actually happens, that gives you a problem. But it gives you a problem that probably is not going to be easily solved by putting the money in the stock market, because if you only get 1.7 growth, the stock market's not going to grow the way it's been growing. Because our economic growth has been way over 1.7. You'd never have a stock market like this one if the economy was growing at only 1.7. So you have to look very, very carefully at that. Let's assume the problem, which is a safer bet perhaps, but let's assume the problem. There are a lot of things you can do. You can advance the age at which people retire. You can reduce the cost of living formula, which Pat Moynihan and a lot of people who are experts at this and who are objective say the cost of living formula is really excessively high now. If you advanced it if you reduced it a point, that would take away a part of the problem. So there are a lot of things you can do other than privatize. Well, how about privatizing some of the fund, as long as you don't reduce the amount that's going into the Social Security now, if you're talking about, some additional monies from the surplus or whatever, and you want to invest that, I have no objection, nor do I accept Greenspan's argument that, well, I don't see how the government can invest in shares without there being a danger that they're going to manipulate. We do it every day. In this state, the comptroller invests billions and billions of dollars in shares. Carl McCall has a very good record of return. It's way above what you get with Social Security. We all know what happens with Social Security now, right? We put in the payroll taxes, and the money goes into a so-called trust fund for Social Security, right? It's supposed to be sitting there waiting for us for when we get old. Forget about it. It doesn't wait there. What happens? They're spending it. Well, what did they give you? They give you IOUs, treasury paper. For what? 2%, I think, or 2.5%, whatever it is. Interest. So there is no trust fund. They've gobbled that up. They've used it. But if you can use some of the surplus funds to invest in a carefully constructed independent entity, well, could you have a really independent entity that won't be influenced by the government? Yes. Who knows that better than Greenspan? What is the Federal Reserve Board? Who orders Greenspan around? Who influences Greenspan? No one. He's perfectly independent. But if you can be independent, you've proven our point, Alan. You're independent. We'll create something like the Comptroller's Office, and we'll appoint them for 10 years, and it'll be non-political, and you can't get rid of them unless they get caught making yicky-yacky in the anteroom, or whatever the rule is. So I am not against privatization of part of the fund. I am certainly against privatization of the whole fund, but I think the whole process should start with us being very careful about what the predicates are here. How real is the problem? We're all kind of accepting the problem in these huge dimensions, but that they would have to establish for me first, and maybe they can. Okay? Yes. Where did I not go? Here, yes. For the Senate, I think. Thank you. I think I would urge my son to run for any position that I might run for before I would run for it. No, and the reason is you don't know him the way I know him, of course, but some of you know a little bit about him. He is everything I am and much more. He has tremendous gifts, much greater than mine. And he's better educated than I am politically. He helped make me governor when he was 24 years old. He has an advantage I didn't have. He's smarter than I am, he's taller, he's better looking, he's quicker. And he trailed behind me and watched me make mistake after mistake after mistake, especially in the early years when I didn't have the slightest idea of what I was doing politically, and where I lost to Koch and lost to Marianne Krupsak, and he went through those campaigns and all the, that painful period of learning how to play this game, which is a game I never did like, to be candid with you. I mean, I love public service. I didn't like politics, and I still don't. But if there were a chance, like this last chance, he would have made a great candidate for Senate. I would have pushed him before I pushed myself. And there's nothing self-effacing about that. It's the reality. I mean, he is better than I am now. And if I, good Lord willing, were around to help him a little bit from behind the scenes, I would be pleased to do it. Yes? Okay. No, none of the universal health care systems are perfect. Canada, a lot of people, complain about having to wait too long, et cetera, et cetera. The advantage they have is they have a universal health care system. They do not have 43 million people without health insurance. I believe in this country, I want to say this as clearly as I can, that on the basis of market principles, you would have millions homeless. Why? Because the economics don't allow you to build affordable housing in Manhattan. The land is too expensive. The construction is too expensive. It doesn't make any sense to pay that big price for the land, that big price for the construction, and then rent it out to people for very low rental. It just doesn't make any sense. And so you must have affordable housing. That's why you needed rent control, because the economics don't work. You'd have an island that was all luxury, and the workers would be traveling in from the outer boroughs. Now, maybe somebody wants that. With education, if you said that only the people who can afford it, a market education, will get an education, you'll have millions of people under or uneducated. It's as simple as that. And with health care, if you say that you're going to use the market system to reach these 43 million, how do you do that? Whom do you get to supply health care, which can get tremendously expensive if you have a breast cancer or if you want a bone marrow operation? How do you do that? In the market system for a woman who's making $25,000 like the woman I gave. You can't. Government has to do it. In the end, you must have government. And the system should be, if you can afford the health care, you should buy it. Not like education, where everybody gets it whether they need it or not. Not like Medicare, where you get it whether you need it or not. Doesn't make any sense for you to give me Social Security and Medicare now. 4 years ago, I would have needed it. But right now, I don't need it. So what you should have is a system that said, look, if you can afford it, you should buy it. But for all those people who really can't afford it, we will buy it, one way or another. Put the money in the pot. Incidentally, what would it be worth to this country to have those 43 million people covered, more productive, more assured, more confident, healthier? What would it be worth to this country to have all those children who now don't have health care in at least a simple health care program where they get preventive care, where they get primary care, and where if they need acute, they get that too. Final point. When I say that everybody should get it and it should be universal and the government should do it, and they should, you're not ever going to have all the health care you want. You're going to be rationing it. We ration it now. Not everybody can get an organ who needs it. Not everybody can get the health care they need in their HMO policy. Right now, you're an old person, you don't get the prescription drugs you need. So that's going to be taken care of, I think, this year. I hope the President has promised to. So there will be a certain amount of rationing. And there is in Canada, and there is in Italy, and there is in Germany, and there are some things you don't get. But some civilized, adequate level of health care, in the long run, there has to be a single payer to do it. And that should be us. And that's the idea of tikkun olam. That's the idea of interconnectedness. That's where it comes to play. In education, in affordable housing, in health care, where we all get together, we all contribute monies for research so that people who don't have the money, can someday be benefited by our investments. Before I go, I must give you this, because one of the big arguments politically always is, what is the role of government? You're a liberal, you're a conservative. I would ban all the labels, incidentally. I really would. I would throw them all out, and I would say, look, when you run on the issues. I'm not interested in whether you're Japanese, whether you're a woman, whether you're bisexual, or gay. I don't care about that. Where are you on health care? Where are you on the tax cut? Where are you, I would ask, on the death penalty? Where are you on Russia? Where are you on this? And answer those questions for me. And then I don't care what you are, a woman, a Greek, the hell with all of that. I care how you vote on these issues. You call yourself liberal. You say liberal, you say conservative. There's a presumption. A liberal person will take all the following positions. That presumption is rebutted by 99% of the liberals you'll meet. What is President Clinton? A liberal? The era of big government is over, he said. He executed a retarded boy. Went back to witness it in the campaign just to make it clear he was for it. That's not liberal. But what is he? He's President Clinton. And people love him for what he is on the issues. But he's not a liberal in the classical sense. He's certainly not a Republican in the classical sense. He's not a conservative. What is he? He's, different positions on different issues. When you get to the role of government, and people say, well, should government do this, should government do that? Here's the best definition I've ever heard from Abraham Lincoln. Government is the coming together of people to do for one another collectively what they could not do as well or at all privately. Great. All the government you need, but only the government you need. How do you decide? An issue at a time. Education. Do you need government or don't you? You decide. Most people would say, yes, we do. Roads and bridges. For most of our history, you don't need the government. The private sector will build all the roads and bridges, or the local governments will do it. You didn't need the federal government until Eisenhower. Eisenhower, Republican, said, no, we need more government here. The interstate highway system, billions and billions and billions of dollars to build. Space, let the private sector do it. No, it's government. Why? Because the private sector won't do it. There's not enough incentive, et cetera, et cetera. It's too much of an investment. We have to make, okay, let's do it. Defense, that's easy. And so on and so forth. What's the problem? Why all this big argument about the role of government? Healthcare. You did Medicare. You didn't want to, you conservatives. You said government shouldn't do Medicare, but you did it, and we have it. You're all supporting it. You did support Medicaid. You said you didn't want to, but you did in 1965, and we've supported it ever since. And so we're committed to the idea that health care is something that the government can help with. Not to operate itself, because government shouldn't operate things except defense, because it's not good at operating things. It wasn't structured for that. So my answer to you is that in the end, government's going to have to pick up the gap. Okay, anything else? Yes, sir. Huh? Last? Say?
2 more questions.
Why didn't you say one more question? Yes. Are you kidding? Me? I'm Mr. Yahoo. First thing I do in the morning is turn on my Windows 95. I haven't got 98 yet, and wonder why they're suing Microsoft. Frankly, I mean, it is an amazing instrument. Obviously, I'm not great at it, but I do it with some reluctance, because I'm not particularly inclined to such things. I have difficulty figuring out with the old typewriters. I told people, why, when you press down the key, what makes the arm come up and then leave an impression on the... But I use it, and I have found, frankly, that you can get an awful lot of research done on that internet. I mean, you can learn almost anything you want. And the system we have, I don't know if it's everybody, it's Netscape, and they'll give you Lycos, and they'll give you everything right there. Plus, they have their own search vehicle. Here, I'll tell you, do I use it? Somebody called me up and said, I didn't know you had written a new book. I said, well, a reason to believe is the last book I did, I am working on something. He said, no, you had a new book. It's for sale. I said, where? He said, well, it was on. I saw it on the internet. I said, you kidding? He said, no. So I went to the internet, Amazon.com. Boom. Mario Cuomo. Boom. The Quotable Cuomo, the candidate. Richard Adler, I think. 1995 or something. I said, what? And then under that, another book. Cuomo is, in quotes. Some other guy. 2 books have been published with my quotes, for which I never got any money, and I didn't know it, but there it was on the internet. Now we're inquiring into this, to who these people are. So yes, I use it. Everybody has to use it, and I'm also trying to figure out what the internet has done to us, and I think the internet and the computers generally and a little bit less TV has done something to us. We are a different people than we were 30 years ago in ways that are almost ineffable, but I have a feel for them. I think we now have so much information that some of us are being confused into thinking that we're wiser because we're more knowledgeable. And we know so much that we accept less from authority. And I think we've developed a skepticism, cynicism. I'm not going to say it's good or bad, but I'm saying it's real. And it's one of the reasons we have no heroes, and we're not going to have. And it's one of the reasons that orthodoxy is finding it difficult, and authority generally is finding it difficult. That in the old days before this easy availability, it was much harder to go to the Britannica, and read that odd spelling in that small print and get the information out of books than it is to get it now from your television or computer. And in the old days, it was easier to live with authority, for better or for worse. It was easier to say, this is what they're teaching me, must be right, etc. There's a lot less of that now. Now there's something good about intellectual curiosity and intellectual pugnaciousness. I mean, I've always, I told some students in one of my classes once, they said, what do you think the most important word in the English language is? And I said, why? And as a matter of fact, in law school, I gave out cards, index cards, and I gave them to my kids who were studying for the bar exam. WHY. When you study the law, you read a proposition, ask yourself why. Why should that be? Why is that the rule? Why do you have to be 18 years old to sign a real estate contract but not a personal property contract? What is the difference? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why? So yeah, I'm on the internet. I'm also going to have to leave now because Engel's mad at me for going overtime. I'm very grateful to you for the opportunity to address you. Thank you very, very much.